Welcome to the Being Human is Good for Business podcast. In each episode, the leadership development experts at Trilogy Effect explore how the process of self-discovery unleashes potential in us all. Now here's your host, Sherilyn Starkey.
Hello, I'm your host, Sherilyn. Welcome to the Being Human is Good for Business podcast. Today, we're joined by the leadership development experts at Trilogy Effect to discuss the concept of embodiment. Why leaders are the way that they are, how they feel, and how they make connections and perceive the world. So let's get right down to it, ladies. My first question goes to Beth Sawicki, one of Trilogy Effect's founding partners. Beth, can you explain the basic concept of leadership embodiment?
For a lot of people, we tend to approach leadership from a very intellectual standpoint. It's a very heady concept for many of us. And the way we approach it is it's a full body experience. So it's about bringing your whole self to your leadership and to your life, really. So it's not just about your intellect or your head center, but it's also your heart center, the connections that you're making with people, the relationships that really keep the business going, and your belly center. So what has you be in action, what you're trying to achieve. So it's bringing all three of those concepts together into your leadership and again, into your life. Within the Enneagram framework, we each have a preference for one of these centers. So we come from we look through the lens of our head, our intellect, or our heart and our relationships, or our belly and getting stuff done. It's very effective, but to be truly effective is to embody all three of those, to bring all three of those concepts to your leadership.
So what you're saying is that leaders use their heads, their hearts, and their guts, really, in doing their jobs every day?
When they're at their best, absolutely. A great example of a leader who is embodying all three centers is Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand. She is, for sure, engaging from all three of those centers as she is leading New Zealand. And we have seen her just beautifully relate to the citizens of New Zealand, handling multiple crises and a new baby since she took office in such a beautiful, really powerful way, particularly powerfully when you have all three centers engaged. It's part of almost knowing your audience. When you're speaking, when you're relating from all three of those centers, you're not leaving anybody out when you're speaking to them. And so it brings people along, which you need to do as a leader, right? Nobody can succeed as a leader on their own. And so engaging from all three of those centers, really, it's a very inclusive way of operating as well. And so, people are inspired by that.
Wendy Appel is partner at Trilogy Effect, and she's author of Inside Out Enneagram, the game-changing guide for leaders. So Wendy, can you tell us a little bit about the Enneagram and how this concept of embodiment relates to that framework?
Sure. I think Beth gave it a pretty good start. There are 9 different Enneagram types with 9 different worldviews and 9 different sets of gifts and challenges, or we call them superpowers, and also the kryptonite of each of the types. So you can group all 9 types into different triads, and one of the triads, or groups of 3, is the head center, the heart center, and the belly center. And each of those groups tends to overuse one center, and the other two, either 2 centers or one of the 2 centers can go offline. And so they have a preference. Each of those groups of 3 has a preference for a particular particular center. And especially under stress, the other ones can go offline and they just use that one center. So for instance, if we stay with leadership, under stress, and when somebody's not very self-aware, they can overuse, for instance, if it's a belly center type, let's say type 8, they can overuse the belly center and it becomes very impulsive action. Stress, I just need to take action. We're trying to make bad feelings go away. We're trying to suppress fears that we have. And so one way that an 8 can deal with that is to be very impulsive and take action. And it feels good because it feels like something's happening. You're doing something. And they may, each type has what we call wings, so types on either side of us. They can also flex to those wings. So for 8, a wing would be in 7, a wing would be in 9. Well, the 7 is a head type. And so it could be just justifying their impulse rather than using the gift of the head center. It could be finding a way to rationalize or justify the impulse, or to put silver linings on things and really be more Pollyanna. And it can create this sense of being a false prophet, right? I'm just wanting you to see the good and I'm trying to make the bad go away. And in a leadership role, that could make, people who want hope, but false hope, follow a false prophet. So those kinds of people will follow. The other people want the truth. They want reality. They want to know what's going on. What are we going to do about it? As Mary Beth said, you've got to engage all 3 centers. What's happening? What are the facts from the head center? What are we going to do about it from the belly center? And then the heart center, I want empathy. You recognize the pain that we're all going through. So the heart center types, they engage the heart. The head center type in a healthy way. It's a lot about empathy. It's a lot about tuning in, being attuned to people's experiences. The head center is a lot, in a healthy way, it's a lot about here are the facts. Here's some analysis. Here's a plan of action. And the belly center in a really healthy way is we're going to take purposeful action based on those other 2 centers.
So do leaders tend to be more dominant towards one of these different centers, people that are in leadership roles, or is it fairly represented?
It depends on what center the leader is in. If it's a head center type, 5, for instance, a type 5, the detached observer, in a very healthy way, they're going to, they tend to then first, let's get the facts, right? And if they're really engaging or embodying all 3 centers, it would be the facts, demonstrating some empathy, right? And understanding people's experiences, and then taking action, belly, from that place. So each type will kind of engage a preferred center first, and then bring in the others to create a full embodiment, leadership embodiment.
And how do they learn to do that?
Good question. The first step is really self-awareness. Most people don't even know that this is happening. This happens so fast, and it's so practiced from our very earliest life that we just do what we do. We are who we are. We act as we act from early days. And it's when we start coaching people, we start helping them see these automatic patterns that they've been engaging so that they can start making some shifts. So this is back to our first podcast, this sort of above the line, below the line. So getting people to the line and seeing where they're at on the line, and then they're able to make different choices.
And this is Heather speaking, but that's often when a leader, which is anybody, frankly, because anybody can lead, that's the moment when you can, if you're aware, reconnect with the center of intelligence, we call it, that goes offline first for you. So that's kind of the practical gift, one of the many practical gifts that the Enneagram provides through self-awareness. For example, if I'm a type 7 leader and I get to that, I'm noticing I'm reacting. I'm having I can feel my whole body is telling me that I'm in a reactive state. Then I know that I need to take a breath. And I also know that because I'm a type 7, the first center of intelligence that I might lose connection with is my heart center. It's that place of empathy. So I might be getting caught up in what I'm thinking and what I want to do, but I might be forgetting about, first of all, how I feel about the situation I'm in, and attuning to how others feel, so that I can be more measured and more deliberate and more sensitive in how I move forward in a situation. So that's a very practical application of the Enneagram, once I know what my dominant type is, then I also know, both my superpower, but also my kryptonite. My kryptonite being that center that I lose connection to and that I need to reconnect with in order to be effective.
So maybe it's a good idea to explain to our listeners which of the Enneagram types fall into which center as being their more dominant way to react.
Okay, so to continue on with this idea of, being aware of what center I lose connection with the earliest so that I can reconnect and become more effective, my most effective, let's look at the first grouping, the types that lose connection to their heart center first when they're starting to feel stressed and overwhelmed are the type 3, the type 7, and the type 8. So all three of those types for different reasons, but they will all kind of start revving up their engines and trying to think more quickly and act more quickly and be quite assertive in their approach. And they can often overstep being in activity mode and not connecting with what's going on in their emotional center, their own feelings, and the feelings of others. So they can be accused sometimes of being they can run over people,
Okay.
and that causes problems.
That's 7, 8, and 2 type, you said?
7, 8, and 3.
7, 8, and 3. So okay.
One of them's a head center. The 7 is the head center type that's very assertive. The 8 is the belly center type that's quite assertive. And the 3 is the heart center type that's very assertive. And they share that common kryptonite, which is the disconnection from their heart as they get more and more stressed.
Right. Sounds kind of familiar.
It does indeed.
Wendy, did you want to pick up and chat about another triad?
Sure. The type 5, the type 4, and the type 9, let me say them in a numerical order. So the type 4, which is a heart center type, the type 5, which is a head center type, and the type 9, which is a belly center type, their belly goes offline. And so all of them tend to pull, unlike what Heather was talking about with the more assertive types on the Enneagram, these are the types that are they more pull in under stress. Pull in, pull away, go into denial, etc. They have all different sorts of strategies about literally physically withdrawing or mentally withdrawing in different ways. And so their body goes offline and they just are not tuned in to what's happening inside themselves at all. They may suppress it and they stop taking action. And they stop being in connection with their instincts.
Wow, powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the key there is they stop taking action, but they don't notice it.
Right.
Yeah.
They may take action, but it can be like really busy work. Like, so they think they're actively being productive, but it's all just sort of, just to stay active, busy work without direction, without focus, without purpose.
Mary Beth, did you want to take on the last triad?
I would love to. So it's type 1 in the belly center, type 2 in the heart center, and type 6 in the head center. And for these three types, the head center is what goes offline for them. And it doesn't mean that they're not thinking. There's a lot of thinking. There's a lot of revving. But what is missing is there's a lack of clarity of thought for these folks. And so what can happen is it's how do I feel about something? What am I going to do about it? So it's that loop without taking the pause to make sure that the head center's online and, again, engaging from all three centers.
I think the practical gifts that this brings is when we're coaching leaders, you're able to understand very quickly if I am of this dominant type. For example, if I am the loyalist, the type 6, I start to build awareness and practices for myself that help me understand that when I start getting a little stressed or a little overwhelmed, I'm going to notice that I'm not thinking clearly. And so a practice for me might be that I take a moment and revisit facts of a situation. That might be my practice as a leader. And that becomes my go-to way of bringing myself back to full alignment between all three of my centers of intelligence. And I can be very present and just rest in the moment and understand and trust that I am going to be able to be effective without my head racing, without being overwhelmed, because I can just trust that I'm here now. I can think clearly. I can sense the feelings of myself and others and be appropriate to the moment. And I can trust that that will guide me in terms of right action. I think the real gift here is having us realize that we can draw from intelligence throughout our whole body. Our body is an instrument of intelligence, and we are socialized and educated to focus on the head center for the most part, in the Western world for sure. And when you start to be able to relax a bit and realize that, wow, I can trust my feelings and, my gut is telling me something. What is that? You actually have a lot more equipment at your disposal than you realize. And you can start to trust and experiment and stay curious and be grateful for what is available actually here in my body that I'm able to draw upon to be an effective leader, that I had no idea I had this instrument, and so many different ways of being able to find guidance.
You know, it's back to what Mary Beth was saying about the Prime Minister of New Zealand and this really beautiful example. I think I posted an article on LinkedIn about her. And it's a really beautiful example of not only what Heather's talking about, which is getting to know yourself better and how do I make sure that I'm engaging all of this inside of me, but it's also how do I engage this and speak to all of this in other people. And so we have to remember that not only do we have to engage our head in a healthy way, our head, our heart, and our belly, but we have to speak to the head and the heart and the belly of our audiences. So for a leader trying to lead people through this time right now, the head is going to provide, facts and data, and here's where we're at in a way that people can digest it. And they're going to speak to people, to their hearts and their empathy and be understanding of what people are going through. And then they're going to give them concrete, purposeful action that they can take and that the government, in this case, the government, will be taking. And it brings people a lot of reassurance when the leader is speaking from that place and to that place in everyone.
Perfect. Thanks to Trilogy Effect for sharing your knowledge and your expertise with us all today. And also thanks to all our listeners. Please see our show notes for some links to some of the news and resources that we discussed today. And please subscribe to our show to tell your friends about it. And of course, we'd love you to rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. This is the Being Human is Good for Business podcast.